Welcome everyone. In today's video, we are going to talk about the color wheel. This is an introductory video. In this video, we will work on understanding primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors. So some terminology that it would be helpful to try to look out for during the course of this video is the color wheel, primary colors, which are red, blue, yellow, secondary colors, which is violet, green, orange, and tertiary colors. So I think just about everyone is familiar with the basic color wheel. If you're aware, there is the visible light spectrum. The visible light spectrum starts with red and it ends in violet. The pure hues on the visible light spectrum are in order from red to orange to yellow to green to blue, and they end in violet. Infrared and ultraviolet are at the far ends of the spectrum and they're not visible to the human eye, so we won't worry about these. So if you see on the right-hand side, for those who are visual learners, I included the visible spectrum here. Now imagine taking this visible spectrum, and wrapping it around in a circle to make what we see as the color wheel, which is right here underneath. Once we match the two ends together, we end up with a fairly useful tool for understanding color. So imagine slicing a circle into 6 and then placing 3 primary colors into every other wedge. So when I say 3 primary colors, I mean blue, red, and yellow. The blank slices between the primaries would each be filled by the secondary color. In this case, they're not blank, but they are orange, green, and violet. So that is created, the secondary color is created by mixing colors that are adjacent to it. Between red and yellow, you would put orange. Between yellow and blue, you would be green. And between blue and red would be violet. This is something we'll go more in depth in. So, as I briefly mentioned before, the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. The reason primary colors are distinctively called primary colors are because they cannot be made from mixing other colors together. So there are no colors that you can mix together to create red, yellow, or blue. You may be able to create shades or tints of those colors, but the pure hues alone cannot be made from mixing other colors together. But primary colors, however, can be mixed together to create other colors. So how do we go from primary colors to secondary colors? As I mentioned briefly before, by mixing 2 primary colors adjacent to each other on the color wheel, we get 3 secondary colors. So look closely at this wheel. Let's start with our first example. If we mix our primary color red, which is here, I put a P for primary, with another primary color yellow, we get orange. Now on the color wheel, we would just insert that orange as a wedge in between the primary colors of red and yellow. If we mix the primary color yellow with the primary color blue, we would get a secondary color of green. On the color wheel, we just insert that green secondary color as a wedge in between the primary colors yellow and blue. And then lastly, if we mix the primary color blue with a primary color of red, we get a secondary color of violet. And we insert that secondary color of violet as a wedge in between the blue and the red. And that's how we get a color wheel with both primary and secondary colors. So just to further break it down for those who are visual learners, and you might get overwhelmed with all of the images that were on the previous slide, if you take a color wheel with just primary colors of red, yellow, and blue, and add the primary colors that are adjacent to each other together, add or mix them, then you'll get the secondary colors. And I put a little breakdown here in the corner for those who it might be helpful to. So if we mix red and yellow together, we'll get that orange in between. If we mix yellow and blue, we'll get that secondary color of a green in between. And if we mix the blue and the red, we'll get that secondary color of violet in between. And that's how we come up with this color wheel that has both primary and secondary colors. So, as mentioned before, secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. Secondary colors can be made from mixing two primary colors together. By mixing two primary colors adjacent to each other, we get secondary colors. And then secondary colors can be mixed with primary colors to create tertiary colors. If this starts to get a little bit confusing, please feel free to pause or slow down the video or leave a question in the comment box. So now we're going to talk about how do we go from secondary colors to tertiary colors. By mixing a primary color with a secondary color adjacent to each other on the color wheel, we get 6 tertiary colors. Now, it's important to mention before I get into this, I'm going to go as slow as I can because it can get quite confusing. Tertiary colors are often different tints and shades, and they have different names depending on the context. For this video, I tried to simplify the names so that they were universal and easily understood based on the resulting color. Okay, so tertiary colors can be named differently and they can kind of show up a little differently in terms of the shade. So I did the best I could to create a general understanding of how we get tertiary colors. Okay, so let's get into it. So we're starting off with our color wheel here that has both primary and secondary colors. Just for review, the primary colors are red, yellow, blue. The secondary colors are orange, green, and violet. So when we want to get a tertiary color, we will mix a primary color and a secondary color adjacent to each other. So, for example, if we mix red with orange, we get the tertiary color red-orange. If we mix the secondary color orange with the primary color of yellow, we get a tertiary color of yellow-orange. If we mix the primary color yellow with the secondary color of green, we will get a tertiary color of yellow-green. If we mix the primary color of blue with the secondary color of violet, we'll get a tertiary color of blue-violet. I hope I didn't mess that up. And then lastly, if we mix the secondary color of violet with a primary color of red, we will get a tertiary color of red-violet. That's how we get this complete color wheel here that has all primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. In order to make it easily observable, I took the tertiary colors and made their wedges a little bit more elongated. So to further break it down for those who need to see more of a breakdown and an explanation, I took each color that we get in a tertiary colors and broke down their origins. So here, wherever you see a P, it just stands for a primary color. If you see an S, it stands for a secondary color, and a T means that it is a tertiary color. This color wheel here is the color wheel that we have both primary and secondary colors that will be mixed before we get the complete color wheel that has primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So let's break it down. So if we mix our primary color red with a secondary color of orange, you will get that tertiary color of red-orange. If we mix the primary color yellow with the secondary color of orange, you get a tertiary color of yellow-orange. When we mix the primary color of yellow adjacent to the secondary color green, you will then get a tertiary color of yellow-green. Now, if we mix the primary color blue that is adjacent to the secondary color of green, you get a tertiary color of blue-green. If you mix the primary color blue with the secondary color violet, you get a tertiary color of blue-violet. And if you mix the primary color red that's adjacent to the secondary color violet, you get a tertiary color of red-violet. So let's look at that on the color wheel. So here you have a color wheel that has all primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So when it comes to tertiary colors, the 6 tertiary colors are red-orange, yellow-orange, yellow-green, blue-green, blue-violet, and red-violet, which are formed by mixing a primary adjacent to a secondary color. Remember, the names here I use are very simplified and they're interchangeable depending on the context in which you're looking at the colors. So tertiary colors can be made from mixing a primary and a secondary color adjacent to each other on the color wheel. So that is it for this lesson on the color wheel. And just as a brief summary, our primary colors are red, yellow, blue, and when we mix 2 primary colors adjacent to each other, we then get our secondary colors, which are orange, green, and violet. And then when we mix 1 primary and 1 secondary color adjacent to each other, we get our 6 tertiary colors. I won't name them all off the top of my head, but the elongated wedge will show you the 6 tertiary colors. I hope that helps.